Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Friday, December 20th. We have a big show for you as always. Today, we take a look at, of course, the games from this weekend, NFL Week 16 game picks, and college football playoff predictions, as well as going over a couple of bowl games. Earlier on in the show, we'll discuss everything going on in the NFL, the multitude of quarterback changes, the Thursday night football game, and of course, we're going to get into our NFL power rankings that we did not get to go over on Tuesday. But before we get into any of that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Friday, December 20th. But like I was saying, we're going to start off our show here today going over a little bit of the Thursday night football action from last night. We saw the Chargers get a massive W over the Denver Broncos. This was a game that was super important for not just the playoff implications of the two teams playing, but a couple teams that were in the hunt in the AFC, including the Cincinnati Bengals, the Miami Dolphins, and the Indianapolis Colts. Now, this result was the best result for those teams in the hunt. We saw a Broncos team that could have clinched with the win, and they're still one win away from clinching. But now it's a very similar situation for the Chargers. Both the Chargers and the Broncos are win and in. The difference between those two teams is their remaining schedule. When we've been going over these playoff scenarios the last couple of weeks, we've continued to say how it's going to be a very tough road for the Broncos. They were able to escape last week with a win that probably they didn't deserve against the Indianapolis Colts. They came out and they played really flat, especially in that first half. The Colts shot themselves in the foot enough times that the Broncos were able to come back and make it look like it wasn't a close game, but they went out there and they really destroyed them, honestly. The Colts should have won that game. Couple mistakes, Jonathan Taylor dropping the football, kind of inexplicable over there, but still. Broncos get away with the W, and now they are very close to the playoffs, but you look at their remaining schedule, right? The Broncos, after this game, have two really, really tough teams. They play the Bengals, who are desperate and trying to get into playoffs at any cost, and the Kansas City Chiefs have only lost one game all season long. Broncos almost beat them last time. A blocked field goal miraculously saved the Kansas City Chiefs' then undefeated season, but still, the Broncos have a little bit of fight in both of those games. The Chargers, on the other hand, most likely are in. They play two of the worst teams in all of football. They play the New England Patriots and then the Las Vegas Raiders. All they need to do is win one of those two games to move on. So this game was very huge for the Chargers, as they now basically are a lock. You look at the percentages, 98% chance to make the playoffs. And I was really impressed by Justin Herbert in this one. Justin Herbert is a guy that I think is pretty clearly a top 5 NFL quarterback. He's a guy that, sure, he's not going to be in conversation with Patrick Mahomes, with Josh Allen, with Lamar Jackson, these guys that are up there in the MVP rankings. But what he does for his team on a nightly basis is incredibly impressive. And I think he's a guy that maybe is one of the most underrated quarterbacks in all of the sport. Right? He goes out there, he doesn't make mistakes. Now, we saw a rare turnover for him in that first half of the game, a first half where the Denver Broncos absolutely dominated the entire game, right? The Broncos were up 21 to 10 heading into the second half or at zeros of the second half. That was a first half that was dominated by the Broncos. We saw Justin Herbert throw a rare interception. He only has 3 on the season. He had the streak of the longest consecutive game streak prior to 2 games ago, where he would not throw an interception. That's 2 straight games with an interception for Justin Herbert, but still, regardless, he's tied for the league lead in interceptions as far as qualified passers go. He is incredible at not turning the ball over. He also does a lot with his legs. We don't generally think of Justin Herbert as a guy that can scramble, but he picked up a lot of huge first downs, a lot of big yards with his legs when the passing game and the guys in the passing game just weren't able to get open against a pretty good Denver defense. But let's talk about the game itself. Getting into this one, like I said, the Broncos absolutely dominated that first half of play, but there were a couple plays in this game that kind of turned the momentum. First of all, the Broncos come out there and they just punch the ball down the Chargers' throat. This is a Chargers defense that was the number one scoring defense in the league as of last week. Now that has changed after they let a 40 bomb go on their heads by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That's not to say that this still isn't a good defense. The defense has absolutely fallen off. They're dealing with a couple of big injuries, and we saw Brashad Perriman, one of their starting linebackers, go down with injury early in this game. The Broncos then attacked the middle of the field. They attacked it with inside running plays, something that's kind of been a weakness of the Chargers all season long, right? But it's not just that, right? They ran up and down the field with their stable of 4 or 5 running backs. Mims got a couple of carries in there as well. I'm curious to see if he gets a couple more carries as the year continues. He's a guy that is incredibly explosive when he gets the ball in his hand. We saw Audric Estime get the first touchdown of the game. He gets in after a Javonte Williams had a couple big runs. Bo Nix ran for a couple of big chunks, and he had a couple big runs in there as well. But that entire first half was just run the ball down the Chargers' throat. Now, something was said at halftime. Something was said at halftime of that game, but before we get there, there were a couple of big plays, like I said, that kind of turned the momentum of this game. Obviously, we saw the Chargers take this win at the end of the day. So what changed from the first half to the second half? Well, I'm going to point to one key thing at the very end of the first half, 21-10. Zeros on the clock, basically. 5 seconds left. The Broncos punt the ball. Riley Dixon, one of the best punters in the league, goes out there, puts a lot of air under it so that the Chargers won't be able to get the ball back, run a Hail Mary play or anything like that. Fair catch interference is called against the Denver Broncos. Now we get the chance to see something rare, right? The free kick. The first time since 1976 that a free kick was successful. This is a very rare play because it has a very rare set of circumstances that allows you to do it, right? This is a free kick that you can only take, and it's like a kickoff. Kick it through the upright, it's a field goal, right? You go out and you run your kickoff play. But the only time you can do it is directly after a fair catch or a penalty regarding an official or a player that's not in the game currently. So if you got into a fight with someone on the bench, you could do that. But this is something that's very rare, right? A 57-yard field goal, he basically just gets a kickoff run up and gets to kick it. Goes in. That changes the momentum. It changes it from a 2-possession game heading into half to a 1-possession game. From there, the Chargers absolutely dominated. Not a single moment of that second half was really great for Bo Nix and the Broncos. And I want to talk about Bo Nix for a second here. But because for all the good that he does, it wasn't an incredibly impressive game. You look at the stat line, and it was fine. It was fine what he did, right? 29 for 44, 263 yards and 2 touchdowns, adding 25 more yards on the ground. Like I said, sprouted out a couple of big runs in that first half. 10 yards a pop, got 2 first downs, each of them. But what I want to point out with Bo Nix is again, something I've kind of pointed out all season long, but especially against this Chargers defense, one that was super susceptible to passes downfield earlier on this season, and really even just the last couple of weeks. They were not aggressive at all. It was 99% dump downs. There were a couple of throws over the middle in that medium range, that 10 to 19 yard range, but there were only 2 throws that were considered deep throws by PFF, by that analytics over there. 2 throws down the sideline on the right side, and neither of them were incomplete. That's the kind of thing that when I look at Bo Nix, I say this is why he isn't a guy that should have been in the Rookie of the Year conversation. This is a guy that did not deserve to get all the flowers that he's getting. I'm not saying he's a bad quarterback, right? He's doing what he needs to do, but the inability of this Broncos offense to push the ball vertically is something that really hurts them. They've had 2 plays of over 50 yards this season. One of them was that Mims touchdown, a beautiful deep post route against the Browns. That was a great one. The other one was also to Mims tonight. It was a screen pass. You take a look at the offense, his average depth of target, it's under 5 yards, right? It's a lot of screen pass. He threw 10 screen passes in this game. 10 out of his 44. That's almost 25% of his passes being behind the line of scrimmage. It's kind of ridiculous, right? This is a Broncos offense that, yes, it's working. So I'm not going to knock it too much, right? They're still able to put up 27 points against what is a good scoring defense. Now, I think that defense is more of a product of its schedule that it's played than it actually being an elite defense. But that's besides the point. They go out there and the Broncos just are unable to get it done. And I think one of the main reasons is I'm not going to blame Bo Nix. Play calling is a big part of it as well. They're just not pushing the ball vertically. And that's something that I'd really like to see, especially as we get into the playoffs, assuming the Broncos are going to get there. Although, like I said, it is a tough schedule to get in. But like I said, playoff implications here. Let's talk about it. Like I said, neither of them clinched. The Broncos could have clinched. They can still both get in this week. It's going to require a little bit of help from the outside. The Chargers get in with a loss by the Colts and the Dolphins this week. It's possible. They've got games that I think they both could lose. The Colts are always liable to lose a game, depending on what kind of Anthony Richardson they get. And the Dolphins are playing the 49ers. Again, depending on what kind of 49ers team you get, that's going to be a tough game. Same thing with the Broncos. They're in this week with a loss by the Colts, the Dolphins, and the Cincinnati Bengals. Not sure if all of that's going to happen, but a huge, huge Thursday night for playoff implications. It was a great game as well. Chargers get a massive victory. They're up to 9 wins on the season now. They're basically a lock for the playoffs. But let me know what you thought of the game. I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we turn our attention to the NFL Power Rankings. 32-1 coming up on the other side here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.